I was standing in my own kitchen when my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're trash. You know that, right?" Not shouted, not whispered, said calmly, like it was a fact everyone else had already agreed on. For a moment, the room went very quiet. The coffee machine hummed, the dishwasher clicked, and my son, my only child, stood right there, staring at the floor like he couldn't hear a word. Candace slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table toward me, neatly aligned, tabbed, prepared. "Sign these," she said, "so we can take care of things properly for you." I looked down at the papers, then back up at her face. She was smiling, not kindly, not nervously, confident, like someone who believed the house was already hers. "I'm 66 years old. I've buried a husband. I've paid off a mortgage. I've balanced checkbooks longer than Candace has been alive." And in that moment, standing barefoot on my own kitchen tiles, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold, I understood something with absolute clarity. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to erase me. "If you're watching," I said quietly to the camera later, "subscribe." Because what happened next is exactly why older women need to stop staying silent. And let me ask you something before I go on. Have you ever been disrespected in your own home by someone who thought you were too old to fight back? If yes, just type "me too" in the comments so no one feels alone. The kitchen looked the same as it always did. My grocery list was still stuck to the fridge with a red magnet. The electric bill I'd paid that morning was clipped neatly underneath. My keys hung on the hook by the pantry door, exactly where I always put them. Everything about the room said this was my home. Candace's voice said otherwise. "You don't really understand paperwork anymore," she continued, tapping the top page with a manicured fingernail. "It's better if someone responsible handles things." I picked up the first page, big font, friendly language, authorization for assistance. That's what the title said. But my eyes drifted lower, past the cheerful wording, past the bullet points, and there it was, medical, financial, decision-making, not ownership, not yet. Control. I didn't say a word. I'd learned a long time ago that silence makes careless people talk. Candace leaned back in her chair. "You don't have to be embarrassed," she said. "A lot of people your age need help. Evan and I have been talking." That's when I looked at my son. "Evan," I asked. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat. "Mom, Candace just wants to make sure you're okay." I nodded slowly. Okay, that word again. The word people use when they're about to decide your life without asking you. "I am okay," I said, "and I don't sign things without reading them." Candace's smile tightened. "Well," she replied, "if you won't cooperate, we may have to get other people involved." The air changed. "What people?" I asked. She shrugged. "People who check on seniors, people who make sure homes are safe." She didn't say the words outright. She didn't have to. The threat was clear. If I didn't sign, she would make me look incompetent, unstable, unsafe, a problem that needed to be handled. I glanced at the clock above the stove, 2:17 p.m., just an hour earlier. I'd been folding laundry in this same room, thinking about what to make for dinner. Now I was being told by a woman half my age that my opinions no longer mattered, that I was trash. "Let me keep a copy," I said evenly. Candace laughed. Actually laughed. "There's no need," she said. "We'll take care of everything." That was the moment something hardened inside me. Because people who plan to take care of you don't rush you, and people who respect you don't call you trash in your own kitchen. I set the papers down. "I'll have my lawyer look at this," I said. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood up. "A lawyer?" She snapped. Why would you need a lawyer? I met her eyes. Because this is my life. For a split second, the mask slipped, just long enough for me to see it. Anger, fear, and something else. Urgency. Candace wasn't planning for the future. She was racing against something. Fine, she said, grabbing the papers, but don't say I didn't warn you. She turned toward the hallway, then paused. You know, she added over her shoulder, people your age end up in facilities all the time. It happens faster than you think. The door slammed. Evan didn't follow her. He stood there, hands at his sides, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't know she was going to say it like that. He muttered. I nodded, but I wasn't listening anymore because my mind had already shifted into a place Candace didn't expect. A place I'd learnt to survive in years ago. When you lose your husband, when you learn how quickly respect disappears once people think you're weak. I picked up my coffee mug and carried it to the sink. The liquid was cold, untouched. I poured it out slowly, then I dried my hands, walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder, thick, labelled, organised, everything Candace thought I didn't understand anymore. And as I flipped it open, I realised something else. She had made one very dangerous mistake. She assumed I was afraid. Candace thought the papers were the beginning of the end for me. What she didn't know was that they were the beginning of hers. After Candace slammed the door, the house felt strangely hollow, not loud, not dramatic, just empty. Evan muttered something about needing air and followed her outside. I didn't stop him. I stood there alone for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of a home I had paid for, cared for, and protected long before Candace ever stepped into it. Then I did something very ordinary. I made another cup of coffee, same mug, same counter, same slow pour. Because when your world tilts, suddenly, the smallest routines are what keep you steady. As the coffee brewed, I opened that folder I mentioned earlier, the one Candace never knew existed. Inside were years of neatly organised papers, tax records, insurance policies, bank statements, and tucked carefully into a plastic sleeve, the documents I'd signed after my husband passed. Back then, a friend had said to me, Marianne, make things clear now. While you're strong, so I did, not because I was afraid, but because I respected myself. I flipped through the pages slowly, checking dates, names, signatures. Everything was exactly where it should be. That was when I realised something that made my stomach tighten. Candace hadn't brought those papers because she thought I needed help. She brought them because she thought I wouldn't check. I sat down at the small desk in the corner of the living room, the one with the loose drawer that always sticks, and I started writing, not a diary, a list, dates, comments she had made, moments that had felt off, like the time she had moved my reading glasses and later asked Evan if I'd been confused again, or when she suggested I stop driving, even though I hadn't had an accident in 30 years, or how she suddenly insisted on handling mail because it was easier for everyone. At the time, each thing felt small, almost silly to question, but lined up together. They told a very different story. This wasn't concern, it was positioning. The front door opened quietly a little while later. Evan came back inside alone. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't know she was planning that. He said, the papers, the way she talked to you. I nodded, still writing. I know, I said. He shifted, uncomfortable. She's just stressed. Work's been hard, money's been tight. There it was, money. I finally looked up. How tight, I asked. He hesitated. Just credit cards, some expenses. I didn't press him, but something clicked into place. Candace wasn't worried about my well-being. She was worried about her future. That night, after Evan went to bed, I stayed up longer than usual. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I reviewed. I checked our home security app on my phone. Nothing alarming, just the usual comings and goings. Then I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. A man at the door, 2 afternoons earlier, tall, well-dressed, not someone I recognised. The timestamp caught my eye. Evan had been out of town that day. I watched the clip again. Candace opened the door quickly, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not polite, intimate. They didn't linger long, but they didn't need to. I set the phone down slowly. If you're listening to this right now, let me ask you something gently. Have you ever felt that moment when the pieces don't quite fit, but your heart already knows the truth? I remember sitting there, the house dark, the clock on the stove glowing 11:42, thinking about how many women my age are told to ignore their instincts, to be nice, to keep the peace. I decided then that I wasn't going to do that anymore. The next morning, I went about my day as usual. Laundry, groceries, a short walk around the block. I even made Candace's favourite soup for dinner. She thanked me, distracted, scrolling on her phone. Nothing felt confrontational, but inside I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And Candace was making one critical mistake. She thought I was still confused. A few days later, she brought the papers up again, this time softer, sweeter. "Have you thought about it?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of water. "I just worry about you." I smiled back. "I have," I said, "and I'd like to talk to someone first." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "Who? A lawyer?" I replied calmly. She laughed, but it didn't sound real. "Oh, Marianne," she said, "that's really not necessary. That was all I needed to hear. Because people who don't want you to get advice are never acting in your best interest." That afternoon, I made a call of my own, not to the police, not to any agency, to a woman I'd been referred to years ago and never thought I'd need, an attorney who specialised in helping older adults protect themselves. She listened quietly as I spoke, didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. And when I finished, she said something that still echoes in my ears. "You're not imagining this, and you're not late." I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt since Candace first walked into my home, relief. If you enjoy stories like this, stories where women don't fall apart but slowly stand up straighter, I'd really like to know. I collect these stories, I tell them because they matter. If this resonates with you, I would truly like to know. And please take care of yourself while you're listening. Sip some water, stretch a little. Tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you listening from? Before I go, let me leave you with this. Candace believed paperwork was power. What she didn't realise was that the moment she pushed those papers across my table, she gave me exactly what I needed, proof. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you about the one phone call she never thought I would make. The next morning, I sat in my car outside a small office building and let myself breathe for 10 seconds. I am not the kind of woman who enjoys asking for help. I grew up in a time where you handled things quietly, paid your bills, kept your family business private, and tried not to bother anyone. But here is the truth no one tells older women until it is almost too late. When someone is trying to take your voice, privacy becomes a weapon against you. So I walked inside. The attorney did not treat me like a problem. She did not speak slowly to me like I was fragile. She looked me in the eye and said, "Tell me exactly what happened." And for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders drop. because I realized I was not crazy. I was not overreacting. I was responding. She asked me simple questions. Have you signed anything? Have you given anyone access to your accounts? Has anyone been pressuring you to do things quickly? Each question felt like a flashlight turning on in a dark room. Then she said something I will never forget. Marianne, people who love you do not rush you. People who need something from you do. I almost laughed because it was so obvious once she said it out loud. On the way out, she gave me a small checklist on one sheet of paper. Lockdown mail, keep originals secured, document dates and exact words, and never, ever sign anything on someone else's timeline. I sat back in my car and looked at that little list. It was not dramatic. It was not revenge. It was protection, if you are listening right now. I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt pressured to sign something quickly or agree to something you did not fully understand? If yes, type one word in the comments for me. Rushed. Just that. Because when women start admitting it out loud, the spell breaks. And after that meeting, I made one quiet decision. I would not confront Candace until I had one thing she could not talk her way out of. After that phone call with the attorney, something in me shifted, and I decided I would not confront Candace until I had one thing she could not talk her way out of. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that, like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. I didn't confront Candace. I didn't accuse her of anything. I did what women my age have learnt to do very well. I watched. The next few days passed like normal on the surface. Breakfast at the same time, mail on the counter, television murmuring in the background during dinner. But underneath, everything felt different. Candace started paying very close attention to me, too close. If I paused for a moment before answering a question, she would glance at Evan and say lightly, "See what I mean if I asked where something was?" She'd tilt her head. "You don't remember moving it." At first, Evan laughed it off. But I saw the seeds being planted. One afternoon, I reached for my reading glasses and they weren't where I always left them, on the small table by the couch, right next to the lamp. I searched calmly, checked the kitchen, checked my bedroom. Nothing. Candace noticed. "Of course. Did you lose them again?" she asked, a little too quickly. "I don't think so," I said. She sighed, the long kind, the kind that sounds caring to everyone else. "That worries me," she said. "What if you need help and can't find your phone next time?" That night, I found my glasses in a drawer I never use. I didn't say a word. Another day, she rearranged the pantry, moved labels I had placed years ago, shifted items just enough. When I reached for something and hesitated, she smiled. You see, she said to Evan, "This is what I mean." I began to understand the pattern. Candace wasn't trying to convince me I was confused. She was trying to convince everyone else, including my son. I started keeping my notes more carefully. Dates, times, exact words, not emotional language, just facts. Monday, she moved the mail, said I had already opened it. Wednesday, she suggested I stop driving. No reason given. Friday, she joked at dinner about putting me in a home one day. Everyone laughed. I didn't. If you're listening to this and thinking, "That sounds small," you're right. That's exactly why it works. Big accusations scare people. Small ones slide in quietly. One evening, Candace brought up doctors. "Just routine," she said. "Everyone your age gets checked." I smiled politely. "I have a doctor," I replied. "I've had the same one for years." She waved her hand. This would be different. More thorough. I knew what that meant. Evaluation, paper trail, opinions written by someone who didn't know me. That night, I barely slept. not because I was afraid, because I was angry at how familiar this tactic was, how many women before me had been slowly talked out of their own authority. The next morning, I did something very intentional. I drove myself to the bank, parked, walked in, stood in line. I chatted with the teller about the weather, answered questions clearly, handled my business. Then I went to the grocery store, chatted with the cashier, used coupons, paid with cash. I wasn't proving anything to myself. I was building a record. When I got home, Candace was on the phone. She lowered her voice when she saw me. "Yes," she said. "I just want to understand the options." She paused. I'm worried about her safety. I didn't interrupt. I walked past her, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the table. When she hung up, she smiled too quickly. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "How about you?" She hesitated. "Just asking questions." She called it asking questions. I called it building a file. It sounds harmless, but questions lead to files. Files lead to decisions. Decisions get made without you. That afternoon, I reviewed my security app again. The same man from before appeared once more. Different day, same hour. Candace answered the door, looked around before letting him in. They stayed longer this time. I watched without sound. I didn't need it. When Evan came home later, Candace was suddenly cheerful, laughing, touching his arm. The contrast made my stomach turn. That night, I added another note to my list. Frequent visitor. When Evan is away, I wasn't spying. I was paying attention. If you've ever had someone slowly question your memory, your judgment, your independence, you know how isolating it feels. People tell you not to overreact, to be grateful someone cares, but care doesn't feel like pressure. Care doesn't rush you. Care doesn't threaten consequences if you don't comply. A few days later, Candace tried again with the papers. This time, she placed them gently beside my plate. No insults, no raised voice, just a soft tone. "I really think this would make things easier for everyone." I didn't even look at them. "I've already spoken to someone," I said. Her face froze. "Who?" she asked. "A professional," I replied. She laughed, but her hand shook slightly as she picked up her glass. "You don't need outsiders," she said. "This is family." That was the moment I knew family was exactly what she was planning to use against me. Later that night, I called my attorney again. This time, I told her everything. The comments, the papers, the man at the door. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something very simple. "This is how it starts." Not how it ends, how it starts. Before I hung up, she asked me one last question. "Do you know who legally owns your home?" I smiled to myself. "Yes," I said, "I do." What Candace didn't know yet was that while she was busy moving my glasses and rewriting the story of who I was preparing to remind everyone exactly who I had always been, and the next step was going to catch her completely off guard. After my attorney asked me that question about the house, I slept better than I had in weeks, not because everything was resolved, but because I knew something Candace didn't. Knowledge has a way of calming you down. The next morning felt strangely normal. Candace was humming in the kitchen. Evan was running late. As usual, the toaster popped up bread a little too dark. Life went on. And that's when I noticed the first real crack in Candace's mask. She was distracted, checking her phone more than usual, stepping outside to take calls, turning her screen away when I walked past. I didn't say anything. I had learned that silence made her careless. One afternoon, Evan told us he'd be travelling for work again, just 2 nights. Candace reacted too quickly. "Oh," she said. Already her voice was light, but her eyes flicked toward me. I nodded politely. "Safe travels," I said. That evening, after Evan left, the house felt different. Not lonely, busy. Candace dressed nicer than she needed to, put on perfume she never wore around Evan, checked her reflection twice before leaving the house. "I'm meeting a friend," she said casually. I smiled. "Have fun?" The front door closed. I didn't move. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed softly on the table. The doorbell camera alert. I opened the app, and there he was again. The same man, standing on my porch, like he belonged there. Candace opened the door almost immediately, laughing before he even stepped inside. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some things don't require touching to be clear. I watched them walk into the living room, sit close, too close. If you've lived long enough, you know the difference between friendship and familiarity. I turned off the app. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt something else entirely, clarity, because suddenly everything made sense. The rush, the papers, the urgency. Candace wasn't planning a future with my son. She was planning an exit, and she wanted to make sure she walked away with something valuable. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and added another page. Same calm handwriting, same steady pen. Dates, times, visitor. I didn't label him anything dramatic, just facts. The next day, Candace was unusually cheerful, too cheerful. She made breakfast, asked if I slept well, even complimented my sweater. People do that when they think they're winning. That afternoon, I checked the mail before she could. Among the usual bills and flyers was a bank envelope addressed to Evan. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Candace noticed it missing almost immediately. "Did you see the mail?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. I left Evan's on his desk. Her jaw tightened. "Oh," she said. "I usually handle that." "I know," I answered gently. "But it's his—" She forced a smile. That evening, Evan called to check in. Candace put him on speaker without asking. "I took care of a few things while you were gone," she said brightly. "Like what?" he asked. "Oh, just paperwork, planning." I caught Evan's hesitation through the phone. "What kind of paperwork?" he asked. Candace waved her hand. "Nothing important." That word again. "Nothing." Later, when she went upstairs, Evan called me privately. "Mum," he said, lowering his voice. "She's been really stressed lately." "I know," I replied. "Do you think you need help?" he asked. "Like extra support?" There it was. The seed had taken root. I chose my words carefully. "I think," I said slowly, "that anyone who loves me should ask what I want before deciding what I need." He was quiet. "I'm okay," I added, "and I'm taking care of things." After we hung up, I felt the weight of something heavy settle on my chest. Not fear, responsibility, because now I wasn't just protecting myself, I was protecting the truth. The following afternoon, Candace made her boldest move yet. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table. No papers this time, just her phone. "I talked to someone today," she said softly. I looked up. "About resources," she continued. "For seniors who need a little help." I waited. "They can do evaluations," she said, "just to make sure everyone's safe." Safe. That word again. I folded my hands. "Did you already schedule something?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not yet," she said, "but I could, if needed." I smiled, a real smile. "Please don't," I said. "I'm already working with a professional." Her eyes widened. "What professional?" she asked. "Someone who advises me," I replied, On my affairs. Her voice sharpened. You didn't tell us. I didn't need to. I said, that night I heard her pacing upstairs, phone calls, whispered arguments, a door closing harder than necessary. I sat in my bedroom, calm as could be, organising a folder on my laptop, video clips, screenshots, notes, all time-stamped, all factual. If you're listening to this and thinking it sounds exhausting, you're right. It is, but it's also empowering because once you stop trying to be liked, you start seeing clearly. Before going to bed, I checked the camera one more time. Another visit planned for the next day. Same man, same hour. I smiled to myself because Candace thought she was being careful. What she didn't know was that every step she took was leading me exactly where I needed to go. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you about the moment I realised she wasn't just trying to control me, she was trying to cash out. The next morning, Candace didn't even pretend anymore. No humming, no small talk. She was waiting for me at the kitchen table. The papers were back, neater than before, organised into a thin folder, like something you'd hand someone at a doctor's office. Sit down, she said lightly. I want to explain this properly. I took my time, pulled out the chair, sat, folded my hands in my lap. She slid the folder toward me. This is just to make things easier, she said. For appointments, banking, emergencies. I opened it slowly. The language was friendly, gentle, words like assistance and support and best interest. But underneath that softness was something sharp, authority, permission, control dressed up as kindness. You won't even notice a difference. Candace continued, I'll just handle things if something comes up. I looked up at her. And if I don't sign, I asked. She didn't answer right away. She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. Well, she said carefully, then I'll have to do what's responsible. I waited. I've already spoken to someone, she added. About situations like this, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm. What kind of situations? She sighed, like she was tired of explaining. When seniors refuse help, she said. When families have to step in. There it was again. Seniors, families, words that sound warm until you realise they're being used to shrink you. I don't need help, I said evenly. Candace smiled, but her eyes were cold. That's not really up to you anymore, she replied. For a moment, I felt the weight of every woman who had ever been told that. I glanced at the clock, 9:12 am. The sunlight through the window hit the table just right, illuminating the place where she wanted my signature. I'm not signing today, I said. Her jaw tightened. I think you're making a mistake. She said, I think you're rushing, I replied. Her voice dropped. If you don't cooperate, she said quietly, people might think this house isn't safe for you. There it was, the threat, finally spoken clearly enough to hear. I leaned back in my chair. Are you threatening me? I asked. She scoffed. I'm trying to protect you. Protection doesn't feel like pressure. Protection doesn't come with deadlines. Protection doesn't make your stomach drop. I'll talk to Evan, she added. He agrees with me. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I stood up. I'll have my lawyer review this, I said, and until then, I won't be signing anything. Her face flushed. A lawyer, she snapped. Why are you making this so difficult? Because you are. But I didn't say that. I simply walked away. That afternoon, Candace didn't speak to me. She slammed cabinets, made loud phone calls, paced the living room like a caged animal. At one point, I heard her say my name followed by the word stubborn. I smiled to myself. That evening, Evan came home early. Candace intercepted him before he even set down his bag. They whispered in the hallway. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew the tone. When Evan finally came into the kitchen, he looked exhausted. Mum, he began. Candace is just worried. I know. I said, she thinks you might need more help than you realise. I nodded. Do you think that I asked? He hesitated. Just a second too long. That hurt more than I expected. I think, I said slowly, that I've managed my life just fine, and if that ever changes, I'll say so. Candace appeared behind him. We're only thinking ahead, she said sharply. Then think with me, I replied. Not for me. Silence. That night. Candace left the house, not dressed up this time, angry. She didn't come back until after midnight. I was already in bed when my phone buzzed another camera alert. I watched her walk in, phone pressed to her ear. Whispering urgently, I caught one phrase before the sound cut off. She won't sign. That was the moment it clicked fully into play. This wasn't about care. This wasn't about concern. This was about timing. Someone was waiting on the other end of Candace's plans, and the clock was ticking. The next morning, she tried a different approach. Soft again. I didn't mean to upset you, she said, setting a cup of tea in front of me. I just don't want things to get complicated. They won't, I replied, as long as we're clear. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the papers. We don't have much time, she said under her breath. I looked at her. Why, I asked? She froze. Then she smiled too quickly. No reason, but there is always a reason when someone is in a hurry to take control. That afternoon, I made another call. Not emotional, not panicked, strategic. I told my attorney exactly what Candace had said. About the pressure, the deadlines, the threats. She listened, then said something that made my skin prickle. She's testing how far she can push, she said, and she's escalating. I hung up and sat quietly for a long time because I knew what escalation meant. More pressure, more lies, bigger moves. Candace believed the next step would force my hand. She believed fear would make me fold. What she didn't realise was that she had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you about the document she tried to sneak past me that finally showed me exactly how far she was willing to go. After that last conversation, I stopped reacting. That doesn't mean I stopped caring. It means I stopped showing my hand. Candace was watching me closely now. Every pause, every breath. So I gave her exactly what she expected to see. Calm, quiet, agreeable. I folded laundry, watered the plants, watched the evening news at the same volume as always. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I was getting ready. The first thing I did was organise, not dramatically, not in a panic. I pulled out a simple folder and labelled it with today's date inside. I placed copies of everything Candace had pushed in front of me, the papers, the notes I'd taken, the dates I'd written down when she threatened me without quite saying the words. I added screenshots from the doorbell camera, clear timestamps, clear faces. I didn't add commentary, no opinions, just facts. Women my age understand this instinctively. When things get dangerous, you don't argue louder, you get clearer. A few days later, I met with my attorney in person. I didn't dress up, didn't rehearse. I brought my folder and my notebook and sat down. She listened the same way she had on the phone. No shock, no judgment. When I finished, she leaned back and said something that surprised me. You're doing this exactly right. That sentence alone was worth the visit. She explained things in plain language. No big words, no legal fog. She told me I had every right to refuse those papers, that pressure and urgency were red flags, that no one could take control of my life without due process. Most importantly, she told me to stop doubting myself. People don't rush you like that unless they need something, she said. I smiled. That's what I thought. We talked through next steps, not aggressive ones, protective ones. I made a list when I got home: change passwords, secure mail, keep originals locked away. I did all of it quietly. That same afternoon, I did something small on purpose. I left a plain envelope on the counter near the fruit bowl. No name, no stamp, just an envelope. Inside was nothing but a folded piece of scrap paper, a decoy. I went upstairs and waited, not like a spy. Like a woman who has lived long enough to know that curiosity is loud. 10 minutes later, I heard it, the soft slide of paper, the pause, the tiny sound of someone trying to put something back exactly the way it was. When I came down, Candace was wiping the counter with a little too much energy. "Oh, good. You are up," she said, smiling like she had not moved a muscle. I looked at the envelope. It was not in the same place, not by much, but it was enough. I picked it up, turned it over, and set it back down gently. Candace watched me. Her eyes stayed on my hands. That is when I understood something that made my skin prickle. She was not just pressuring me with paperwork. She was testing access. She wanted to know what I kept, where I kept it, and how quickly she could get to it. That night, I moved my important originals to a lockbox and left only copies in my usual folder, not because I was afraid, because I was done being predictable. If you have ever had someone in your home who made you feel like you had to hide your own life from them, I want you to answer this in the comments. Do you think privacy is a right, or do you think family means anyone can access anything? Just type right or access. I promise you, your answer matters more than you think, because while Candace was busy pretending to be helpful, she was getting sloppier, and sloppy people leave fingerprints. That same week, Candace became noticeably tense. She started checking in on me more often, too often. Where are you going? What time will you be back? Did you take your phone? Concern. On the surface, control. Underneath, I answered politely. Briefly, no extra information. It unsettled her. One afternoon, I noticed she was rifling through a drawer in the living room. My drawer. She jumped when she realized I was there. "Oh," she said, "I was just looking for batteries." I nodded. "There are some in the kitchen," I said. She didn't move. That night, I locked my bedroom door, not out of fear, out of boundaries. If you've never had to lock a door inside your own home, you don't understand how loud that sound can feel. The click echoed in my chest, but it also felt like relief. A few days later, Evan told us he'd be gone again for work. Candace tried to hide her reaction. She failed. The moment he left, the house shifted, not hostile, busy. Candace made more phone calls, closed doors, lowered voices. I could feel the pressure building. She was running out of time. That's when I noticed something else. Bank envelopes, not addressed to me, appearing more frequently, always opened before Evan saw them. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. Patterns don't lie. I started checking the mailbox earlier in the day, quietly. One envelope caught my eye, a home equity offer, the kind that shows up when someone has been asking questions or clicking around online. I felt a chill run through me. That was new. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about how quickly things had escalated, from comments to papers to threats to money. This was no longer just about control. It was about access. I made one more call, this time, to someone my attorney recommended, not a detective, not anything dramatic, just someone who knew how to look. I didn't tell Candace. I didn't tell Evan. I didn't need to. The next morning, Candace tried kindness again. She brought me toast, asked if I slept well. Her voice was almost gentle. I had accepted the plate, thanked her, and said nothing else. That silence made her nervous. She filled it with words. I just want what's best for everyone, she said. I looked at her and wondered how someone could say that so easily while doing the opposite. Later that day, my phone buzzed, a message. Short, simple. I stared at it for a long time before reading it again, because in that moment I knew something important. Candace thought she was managing the situation. What she did not know was that while she was watching me, a licensed professional was quietly documenting patterns. And what I learned next was not about my memory at all. It was about my house. The message came in late that afternoon. No emojis, no explanation, just a few words that made my fingers go cold around the phone. She's asking questions about the house. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't panic. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked around the room. Same table, same chairs, same sunlight slanting across the floor like it always did at this hour. Candace was upstairs, on another call. Of course she was. I carried my phone into the living room and closed the door quietly behind me. Then I made a call of my own, to my attorney. When she answered, I didn't waste time. She's asking about the house. I said, there was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I replied. Very sure. Another pause. Then she said something that surprised me. Good, she said. Good is not the word acknowledging people usually expect in moments like that, but I understood what she meant, because if Candace was asking questions now, it meant she had reached the point where guessing was no longer enough. She needed confirmation, and confirmation is dangerous when you are wrong. We met the next morning, not rushed, not dramatic, just two women sitting across a desk with a file open between us. She slid a document toward me. Simple, official, and suddenly everything Candace had been doing made sense. The urgency, the pressure, the sudden interest in evaluations and paperwork, because the house she thought belonged to her husband did not belong to him at all. It belonged to a trust, my trust, set up years ago, properly, legally. I didn't need to ask what that meant. I already knew. But hearing it out loud still landed heavily. She cannot refinance it, my attorney said. She cannot leverage it. And she certainly cannot claim it in a divorce. I nodded slowly. So, she's been chasing something she can't touch. I said, yes, she replied. And she doesn't know it yet. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not triumphant, grounded, because knowledge doesn't make you reckless. It makes you patient. Candace was in the kitchen when I got back. She was unusually quiet, didn't look up right away. How was your morning? She asked. Productive, I replied. She glanced at me, then away again. I could feel her watching me, trying to read my face, trying to see if something had changed. I didn't give her anything. Over the next few days, her behaviour shifted, less confidence, more tension. She hovered when I was on the phone, listened from doorways, asked questions that didn't quite connect. Have you ever thought about selling? Do you still have all the paperwork? Wouldn't it be easier to simplify things? Simplify. That word again. I smiled politely and changed the subject. Inside, I was counting. The visits from the man at the door increased, shorter, more frequent, always when Evan was away. I didn't watch every clip anymore. I didn't need to. The pattern was clear. One evening, Candace made a mistake. She left a document on the printer, not fully printed, just the first page. It was nothing official, just notes, names, numbers, and a line that caught my eye. Equity, potential. I didn't touch it. I didn't take it. I memorized it. Then I walked away. That night, I slept deeply, because when someone starts scrambling, you know you're close to the truth. The next morning, Candace tried to regain control. She sat across from me with forced calm. I've been thinking. She said, "We should talk about the future." I sipped my coffee. "What about it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Well," she said, "if Evan and I ever needed to make changes, having things clear would help." Clear for whom? She didn't say. I set my mug down. "Everything is very clear." I said. Her eyes flicked up. "What do you mean?" I replied gently. "I know exactly what belongs to me." Her face went still, just for a moment. Then she smiled. "That's good," she said too quickly. But something in her tone had changed. She was no longer certain. She was calculating. That afternoon, Evan came home unexpectedly early. Candace stiffened when she heard the door. They spoke in hushed voices, urgent. When Evan finally came to find me, he looked tired. "Mum," he said, "Candace says we need to have a serious conversation." I nodded. "I agree." I said. He seemed relieved. "What about?" he asked. I met his eyes. "About honesty," I replied, "and about ownership." That word landed heavily between us. Ownership. He frowned. "What do you mean?" I said slowly. "There are some things people assume and some things they should verify." Candace appeared behind him. "What's going on?" she asked. I stood up. "Soon," I said. "We'll talk about it all." She didn't like that. I could see it in her hands. The way they clenched, then relaxed. That night, the house was tense. Candace stayed up late, pacing, calling, whispering. I stayed in my room, calm, because I knew something she didn't. The foundation she had been building her plan on was never real. And when a plan collapses, people panic. They make mistakes. The next step was no longer about gathering information. It was about choosing the right moment to let the truth speak for itself. And in the next part, I am going to tell you about the meeting Candace thought would secure her future, and how she walked into it believing she was in control. The night before that meeting, Evan knocked on my bedroom door. He did not come in right away. He stood there like a boy again, not a grown man. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something." I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. He swallowed hard. "We are in more debt than I told you," he admitted. "Not because of emergencies, because of spending." I did not flinch. I had suspected, but hearing it out loud still hurt. Then he said the part that made everything click into a single picture. "Candace keeps saying the house is our safety net." There it was, her timeline, her urgency, her desperation dressed up as concern. I reached for his hand, not to comfort him like a child, to steady him like a man who needed to wake up. "Evan," I said quietly, "a marriage does not get saved by stealing from your mother." He nodded, tears in his eyes. And in that moment, I knew the meeting tomorrow was not just about paperwork. It was about whether my son would keep choosing comfort over truth. If you were me, what would you do next? Would you go in gentle or would you go in firm? Type one word, gentle or firm. Because tomorrow I was going to find out what Candace really believed she was entitled to. The meeting took place on a Tuesday morning. It was a mediation meeting, the kind couples use when marriage starts cracking and money suddenly matters. Nothing dramatic about that. Just a regular weekday, the kind where people assume nothing life-changing's going to happen. Candace insisted we all go together. She said it would be easier, cleaner, more adult. The word she used was responsible. We sat in a small office with neutral walls and a long table that had seen 100 conversations like ours. My attorney was there too, quiet and professional, letting the facts speak instead of my emotions. A mediator was there, professional, calm. Evan sat beside Candace. I sat across from them. I had my folder with me, not thick, not threatening, just complete, and inside were certified copies, the kind you cannot argue with once they are on the table. Candace spoke first. She always liked to. She talked about stress, about pressure, about how hard it was to care for everyone. She used words like concern and safety and future. She never once looked at me when she said them. I listened quietly. The mediator nodded, took notes. Then it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue point by point. I simply told the truth. I talked about the papers she tried to rush me into signing, the threats she wrapped in concern, the visits that happened only when Evan was away. I placed my folder on the table, not dramatically, just enough. The room changed. Candace shifted in her chair. I slid out the first item, a printed still from the doorbell camera, time-stamped. The mediator looked at it, then at Candace. She explained quickly, "He's a friend." She said he stopped by. I nodded. And the other visits, I asked calmly. She frowned. What other visits? I placed the next page down, another time-stamp, another date. Candace stopped smiling. I moved on. Screenshots of messages, not romantic words, scheduling words. Tomorrow, same time, when he is gone. Evan's face tightened. Candace, he said quietly. She turned to him. It's not what you think. She said, I didn't interrupt. I let the silence do the work. Then I placed the next document on the table, the authorization papers, the ones she had called harmless. The mediator leaned in. These give broad financial and medical access, she said slowly. Candace crossed her arms. It was just in case. In case of what the mediator asked. Candace hesitated. I could feel the moment slipping, so I placed the final document down, the one that changed everything. The deed, the trust, clear, stamped. Unarguable. The mediator read it carefully, then looked up. Have you ever seen a room go quiet like that, when the truth finally arrives? This property, she said, is not owned by your husband. Candace's face drained of colour. It's held in a trust. The mediator continued, by his mother. The room went very still. Evan turned toward Candace. What does that mean? He asked. It meant everything. Candace laughed nervously. That can't be right, she said. We live there. The mediator shook her head gently. Occupancy does not equal ownership, she replied. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Candace's voice rose. So what are you saying? She demanded. The mediator stayed calm. I'm saying, she replied, that you cannot make decisions about this property. Candace turned to me. You knew, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied. Her eyes flashed. You let me think it was Evan's. I never told you that. I said you assumed. Evan looked between us. Candace, he said slowly, did you know this? She didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. The mediator cleared her throat. There's also the matter of the pressure to sign, she said, and the language used. She looked directly at Candace. Calling someone trash is not concern, she added. Candace stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's manipulating you." No one moved. No one agreed. She sat back down, breathing hard. I spoke then, quietly. "I never asked for control over your life." I said, "I only asked to keep control of mine." The mediator nodded. Evan stared at the table. "I didn't know." He said, "About the papers or the visits." Candace reached for his hand. He pulled it away. That small movement said more than any argument could. The meeting ended without shouting, without slammed doors, just consequences. Candace was advised to seek her own counsel. Boundaries were established. Timelines were discussed, clear ones. As we walked out, Candace didn't speak to me. She couldn't look at me. Evan stayed behind for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know," I replied. The drive home was silent. That night, Candace packed a bag, just one. She said she needed space. I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. I sat in the living room, listening to the house settle, the way it does when something heavy has finally been lifted. I knew this wasn't the end. People like Candace don't accept reality easily. They test it. They push it. They look for cracks. And she still hadn't faced the full cost of what she tried to do, because the truth doesn't just come out. It arrives, step by step. And in the final part, I'm going to tell you how Candace learned that calling someone trash doesn't make them disappear. It simply reveals who never deserved a place at your table. When Candace walked out with that single bag, the house did not feel empty. It felt honest for the first time in a long while. The walls weren't holding their breath. The air didn't feel tight. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Evan slept on the couch that night, not because I asked him to, because he didn't know where else to put his thoughts. I didn't lecture him. I didn't say I told you so. I made breakfast the next morning like I always had. Eggs, toast, coffee poured slowly, the way I like it. He sat at the table, quieter than usual. I didn't see it. He finally said, "I know." I replied, and I meant it, because here is something I have learned in my 66 years. Good people do not imagine bad intentions easily. That is not weakness. It is kindness. But kindness without boundaries becomes an invitation. That week, Evan and I talked more than we had in years. Not arguments, conversations about trust, about assumptions, about how love does not mean surrendering your judgment. He apologized again. I stopped him. "You don't owe me guilt," I said. "You owe yourself clarity." He nodded, and I saw him grow up a little in that moment. Candace did not come back. There were messages at first, carefully worded, then sharper ones, then silence. The legal pieces resolved quietly. No shouting, no public scenes, just consequences arriving exactly where they were supposed to. I updated my paperwork, reconfirmed my trust, locked things down properly, not out of fear, out of self-respect, and then something unexpected happened. I began to feel lighter, not victorious, not proud, just lighter, because I no longer had to prove that I was capable. I already knew it. Looking back now, I see the signs so clearly it almost hurts. The little comments, the jokes that were not jokes, the way my competence was slowly rewritten by someone who needed me smaller. And here is one of my personal truths. I do not believe Candace woke up one morning planning to be cruel. I believe she woke up believing she was entitled to decide, entitled to manage, entitled to take. That belief is dangerous, especially when it meets someone who has been taught to be polite instead of firm. If you are listening to this and something feels familiar, I want you to pause. Ask yourself a few gentle questions. Who speaks for you when you are not in the room? Who benefits when you doubt yourself? Who rushes you when you ask for time? Those answers matter. One thing this experience taught me is that independence does not disappear with age, it only becomes quieter. And people who listen carefully can hear it. People who do not will try to replace it with their own voice. Here is another personal realization I want to share. I used to think strength looked loud, arguments, raised voices, walking out dramatically. Now I know better. Strength is quiet consistency. Strength is reading the paperwork. Strength is asking one more question. Strength is saying, I will think about it, and meaning it. And sometimes strength is locking your bedroom door and sleeping peacefully anyway. If I could sit across from you right now, I would tell you this. You are allowed to take up space in your own life. You are allowed to say no without explaining. You are allowed to protect what you built. Age does not make you disposable. It makes you experienced. And experience deserves respect. I also learnt that dignity does not require revenge. Candace expected anger. She expected fear. She expected me to break. What she did not expect was calm. She did not expect paperwork. She did not expect patience. She did not expect me to outlast her urgency. That is the part I hold on to. I did not win by being louder. I won by being steadier. If you are dealing with someone who questions your memory, your judgment, your worth, please hear this clearly. You are not imagining it, and you are not late. It is never too late to ask for clarity. It is never too late to draw a boundary. It is never too late to choose yourself. I want to ask you something personal now. As you are listening to this story, where are you right now? Are you sitting at a kitchen table like I was? Are you listening late at night when the house is quiet? Tell me. I read every comment. If this story helped you feel a little less alone, please tap like and subscribe. It helps me keep telling stories that matter. Not because numbers matter, but because stories like this matter. They remind us that we are not weak for wanting peace. We are wise for protecting it. Before I end, I want to leave you with a few thoughts I carry with me now. You do not owe access to anyone who disrespects you. Love does not require silence. And kindness does not mean compliance. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. And your life belongs to you. If this story stirred something in you, I would love to know, what lessons stayed with you the most? What would you do differently if you recognized the signs sooner? Leave a comment. Let us learn from each other. Take care of yourself. Drink some water. Stretch a little. And remember this, being called trash does not make you worthless. It reveals who never deserved access to you in the first place. Your voice matters.